So while I will in good faith work with Prime Minister Mark Carney on unwinding the mountain of destructive legislation, let's talk about the elephant in the room, that being separation.
The intensity's ramping up here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got the CBC running a hit piece on Danielle Smith, trying to say she blew a whole bunch of money going down to meet with Donald Trump before the election, trying to save Canada's energy prosperity, all that. And with that, we've got Danielle Smith making a huge announcement, a list of 5 demands Alberta requires from Mark Carney and the government to move forward with a peaceful coexistence with the Liberals. This is going to absolutely explode here in the next few days. We've also got Pierre Poilievre making his first appearance in a video since the election loss. It's good stuff. Let's jump into this. First off, we got Quito Maggie from Main Street Research. So it turns out they had the closest predictions of election results, as we see here. These are their final polling numbers. These were the final actual results from the election. They're only 0.1% off for the Liberals, 0.2 for the Conservatives, 0.1 NDP. They got the bloc exactly, 0.7 for the Greens, 0.1 for the PPC. When it came down to it, we didn't believe the polls because we didn't realize 43% of Canadians are absolutely insane. We also have Mark Carney making his first appearance here in Washington, D.C. They flew down the day before. Mark Carney arrives to no one. There's no one on this tarmac. Waves to no one. He is a little man, isn't he? He's a really small guy. He's always the smallest man in a room. I thought I'd bring up this. This is the Office of Conflicts of Interest Ethics Commissioner page. This is Mark Carney's page. So far, we can take a look at all of Mark Carney's gifts. Cpac, I'm not sure what that is, some sort of First Nations gift. An Edmonton Oilers jersey. Mark Carney received a bottle of Chateau Lynchbon 2014 from Macron, as well as a bottle of Cognac Montreal Cordon Bleu from Macron, a Hermes tie from Macron, a laser engraved of 10 Downing Street door crystal bowl from the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, and pro rink pants from the Edmonton Oilers. This will get updated eventually on his actual conflicts of interest, depending if he's able to sell or transfer his assets over to a family member like his brother, who won't have to be scrutinized with this conflict of interest. His wife will be disclosed as well, so he couldn't just pass stuff to his wife. But he does have siblings and family, so we'll see what happens when they finally show full disclosure on his assets. Next up, we got this one. Mike Myers and Michael B. Jordan are our first celebrities named in Diddy's trial. As Scott says here, are we still supposed to have our elbows up? This is not a joke. It's right here coming off the Sun US. Fate looms, first celebs named in Diddy's trial. Yeah, Mike Myers. Carney really knows how to pick him, who he hangs out with. Next up on CBC, I thought this was interesting. They're running a story here saying Alberta's premier to visit Trump resort cost more than $10,000. Documents revealed.
Well, as Canada's Prime Minister prepares for his meeting with Donald Trump, we're learning more today about a meeting in early January between Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith and Trump. Who went and how much did it cost? We know it took place at Trump's residence in Palm Beach, Florida. And as Julia Wong tells us, some critics are raising questions about whether taxpayers received good value for their money.
Value for our money? Are you kidding me? Mark Carney helped Brookfield dodge $5.3 billion in taxes. They're talking about 10 grand.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has called her meeting at Mar-a-Lago with then President-elect Donald Trump constructive. Now more details are emerging about the trip itself. The visit in early January took place before Trump became president and came as a trade war with the United States loomed. Smith has said she emphasized the mutual importance of the U.S.-Canada energy relationship and that she had discussions with key allies.
This is CBC here. $600 million, I just showed you in the last episode, was handed over to Telesat Lightspeed, a buddy of Mark Carney's. Interest-free for multiple years. That was like a $2-point-something billion loan for multiple years interest-free. They're going after Danielle Smith here for 10 grand because of all the separation talk. This is revenge from CBC. That's what this is. I brought up hundreds of things on my far-off rip-off segments. Value for money, gender-sensitive climate farming in Uganda, or how about this one here, the most ridiculous one of them all, $26,000. So this is 2.5 times more money than what the CBC's running a story on here of Danielle Smith. For training representatives of Rural Women's Network to raise awareness using drama songs, verbal demonstrations to counter violence against women accused of being witches and sorcerers. The Liberals spent money on this. They spent money on a documentary of the life of a shopping cart. They spent money on all sorts of adult-themed screenplays. There's $3.44 billion given to the World Bank with no accountability. They don't mention that, but they'll mention 10 grand for Danielle Smith trying to make a deal with Donald Trump to save Canada, to save our energy sector. Are you kidding me?
We're talking about a large sum of money, $10,000, to be spent for perhaps more people being involved than were necessary.
We know of at least $400 million in the SDTC scandal. That money was shuffled over to well-connected insiders. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Eco-green climate companies not having to prove they actually reduced their emissions. This got billions of dollars. And they're going after Danielle Smith for 10 grand. And they have to bring on a political science professor to say, that's so bad.
For what might have been a very brief exchange and had very little impact. So it's about the wise expenditure of scarce.
She got one-on-one time with the president, the soon-to-be president back then, of America, of the strongest nation on earth and our biggest trading partner. They just find any sort of shill to bring on this show. CBC's disgraceful.
Taxpayer dollars that comes into question in cases like this.
The Premier's office pointed to comments she's previously made, where she said her strategy was to meet with people who can influence the U.S. president.
Yet these guys just a couple months ago gave $84 million to a branch arm of Al-Qaeda. Where was the CBC on that one? I guess they forgot to report that one, didn't they? Next up, the clown show of Mark Carney meeting Donald Trump has begun. We've got Howard Ludnick here having a laugh about Canada.
Mark Carney, whom I've met as central banker, are you optimistic? Can we make a deal with Canada?
I think it's really complex. I think this is really complex because they have been basically feeding off of us for decades upon decades upon decades, right? They have their socialist regime, and it's basically feeding off of America. I mean, the president calls it out all the time. Why do we make cars in Canada? Why do we do our films in Canada? Come on. So I think the president's going to have, I think it's going to be a fascinating meeting. I'm glad I'm going to be there listening, but it's going to be a fascinating meeting tomorrow. I just don't see how it works out so perfectly.
But you're not.
Oh boy, buckle up, folks. Elbows up, it's now buckle up. Next up, we have Pierre Poilievre making his first appearance, his first video here since the devastating loss. There's some very important things to notice from this video.
Well, it's been about a week since the election, and it didn't go how we wanted. But when you get knocked down, you get up and get going. And we've got a lot to be thankful for. I'm thankful for you, the countless people who packed out our rally halls, our 2.3 million extra votes, the 25 extra seats, the breakthroughs in Ontario and BC, the expanded coalition of young people, union workers, entrepreneurs, soldiers, and countless others who had never voted before and are now supporting our conservative cause. Now, it wasn't enough. We didn't get over the finish line, which means that I need to learn and grow, and our team needs to expand. That will be my mission. And we've got a path. With a path to get elected back into Parliament as soon as possible, we'll be holding the government to account, proposing better ideas to solve the problems that you're facing every day. And our mission hasn't changed. I still want to put you back in charge of your life, give everyone who works hard a fair shot at an affordable home, living on a safe street, protected by police and soldiers and sound laws so that everybody's safe and our flag flies high over the freest country on earth. Now, it won't be easy, but easy street leads to a dead end, and the hardest paths lead to the best destination. Our destination is a country where the possibilities are as big and blue as this prairie sky. Let's make it happen.
So first off here, it says, we didn't get over the finish line. I need to learn and grow. And you notice some of the criticism was using too many slogans. No slogans here. One tidbit about slogans. I think keeping the ones that are funny, like hug a thug, those are good. Using too many slogans, I think, saturates people. The fact that he says I need to learn and grow, and they have already learned and started to grow from this process in the first video, a great sign. Not to mention, as conservatives, we didn't get crushed. We didn't lose seats. We gained seats. We have more support, more votes than any conservative prime minister in the last 40 years. It just wasn't enough because Mark Carney was using fear, and fear motivates people more than hope, sadly. That's why you see tabloids always using fear and scandals versus someone saved a puppy, someone did something nice. Pierre Poilievre comes back stronger than ever. 8 million Canadians and growing have your back. I voted for you, man. Latinos with you. Great comeback video here. Alberta is the place to rebuild. The question is now, what's Mark Carney going to do? Is he going to lure NDP members over to the dark side? He says he's not doing a coalition with them. Next up, we have Danielle Smith. She has just come out with an absolute bombshell, a list of 5 demands from Mark Carney, and her demands are very reasonable. But Mark Carney's not going to like them.
We have a new prime minister. And I will say that in my first conversation with him since the election, he had some promising things to say about changing the direction of his government's anti-resource policies. However, Albertans are more of a actions speak louder than words kind of people. So while I will in good faith work with Prime Minister Mark Carney on unwinding the mountain of destructive legislation and policies that have ravaged our provincial and national economies this past decade, until I see tangible proof of real change, Alberta will be taking steps to better protect ourselves from Ottawa. As a start, I will soon appoint a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government on the following reforms requested by our province. We hope this will result in a binding agreement that Albertans can have confidence in. Call it an Alberta Accord, if you will. First, Alberta requires guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for the international export of Alberta oil, gas, critical minerals, and other resources in amounts supported by the free market rather than by the dictates and whims of Ottawa.
Wow, this is a shot across the bow. He's setting up a group to negotiate with Ottawa. And the first demand here, obvious, port access. Need to be able to sell product to market here. Is Carney going to allow this? No, he won't.
Every province in the country, other than Alberta and Saskatchewan, have coastal port access. And no province needs it more given the size and value of our resources. This will benefit all Canadians to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic activity, including billions for First Nations partners. Second, the federal government must end all federal interference in the development of provincial resources by repealing the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, the oil tanker ban, the net zero electricity regulations, the oil and gas emissions cap, the net zero vehicle mandate, and any federal law or regulation that purports to regulate industrial carbon emissions, plastics, or the commercial free speech of energy companies.
That's a big one there. Basically telling Mark Carney to not pursue his life's mission here of net zero. What he set up at Brookfield being the net zero company to profit handsomely off that. I don't see it. I see this whole situation blowing up. Big time.
These laws are destroying investment confidence and costing Canada and Alberta hundreds of billions in investments each year. They need to go. Third, the federal government must refrain from imposing export taxes or restrictions on the export of Alberta resources without the consent of the government of Alberta. Frankly, all provinces should be given that same respect for their resources. And fourth, the federal government must provide to Alberta the same per capita federal transfers and equalization as is received by the other 3 largest provinces, Cpac, Ontario, and British Columbia. We have no issue with Alberta continuing to subsidize smaller provinces with their needs, but there is no excuse for such large and powerful economies like Ontario, Quebec, BC, or Alberta to be subsidizing one another. That was never the intent of equalization, and it needs to end.
Wow. Coming out here swinging. This is very reasonable. I mean, the fact that she said, we're fine with helping out the smaller provinces, but how do you argue against this? Ontario should pay their own way. So should Quebec. Pay your own way, guys. With the amount of money saved that could get put into further projects for further prosperity. Once again, Mark Carney's not going to touch this. Is he going to do any of those? I don't think so.
If these points can be agreed to by the federal government, I am convinced it will not only make Alberta and Canada an infinitely stronger and more prosperous country, but will eliminate the doubts a growing number of Albertans feel about the future of Alberta in Canada. While these negotiations with Ottawa are ongoing, our government will appoint, and I will chair, the Alberta Next panel. This panel will be composed of some of our best and brightest judicial, academic, and economic minds to join with me in a series of in-person and online town halls to discuss Alberta's future in Canada, and specifically, what next steps we can take as a province to better protect Alberta from any current or future hostile policies of the federal government.
She is not messing around here, setting things up for separation. You'll see in this press conference, though, she's not advocating for Alberta's separation, though.
Details of the membership and scope of that panel will be released in the coming weeks. After the work of the panel is finished, it is likely we will place some of the more popular ideas discussed with the panel to a provincial referendum so that all Albertans can vote on them sometime in 2026. To be clear from the outset, our government will not be putting a vote on separation from Canada on the referendum ballot. However, if there is a successful citizen-led referendum petition that is able to gather the requisite number of signatures requesting such a question to be put on a referendum, our government will respect the democratic process and include that question on the 2026 provincial referendum ballot as well. I also want to state unequivocally that as Premier, I'm entirely committed. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, that being separation. We are well aware that there is a large and growing number of Albertans that have lost hope in Alberta having a free and prosperous future as a part of Canada. Many of these Albertans are organizing petitions to trigger a citizen-initiated referendum, as I mentioned earlier. The vast majority of these individuals are not fringe voices to be marginalized or vilified. They are loyal Albertans. They are quite literally our friends and neighbors who've just had enough of having their livelihoods and prosperity attacked by a hostile federal government. They're frustrated, and they have every reason to be. I want to talk directly to those Albertans. I know how frustrated so many of you have become with our country and the feeling of having politicians living thousands of miles away, passing laws and rules that have cost you your loved ones, jobs, careers, dreams, and opportunities for a brighter future. As most Albertans know, I have repeatedly stated I do not support Alberta separating from Canada.
With all this talk of separation, let's take a look here at an update on the Alberta Sovereignty Project. I was asking here if anyone knows how many signatures it's up to, because you have to be a member. You have to be living in Alberta and pay for the membership. So since I live in BC, I was asking, and you can see here people basically saying 143,000 registered votes for a referendum. They need 166,000. So this vote will go forward. And as we heard Danielle Smith just say, it'll happen next year. So this will be a long process. There'll be negotiations with Alberta and the rest of Canada. It's not going to be a quick process. It's not going to be like a quick separation, off you go. Alberta would need its own police force, its own taxation system, its own currency, a whole bunch of stuff. So, and hopefully before then, we can actually sort the things out so Canada can actually unite. I don't think Mark Carney's the guy to do that. And maybe within a year and a half, 2 years from now, we'll have another election. Mark Carney's government will fall and Pierre Poilievre will step in and completely unite east to west all of Canada.
I personally still have hope that there is a path forward for a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. And let me explain a few reasons why. First, Alberta already has and can continue to use the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act and other measures to fight through much of Ottawa's damaging interference and prosper in spite of it.
Danielle Smith is positioning herself here to want to work with Canada. She's not advocating for separation, putting rules on the table that make it fair for Alberta. What will Mark Carney do? Because if he says no to this, he looks like an absolute buffoon. I mean, this is the guy who is bragging about bringing together all the provinces and interprovincial trade. What will Mark Carney do? Will he actually do what's right for the people of Alberta, for Western Canada? Will he make things fair? I don't think so, but we'll see.
We will also continue our successful battles against these unconstitutional and damaging policies in both the courts of law and public opinion.
There we have it. All this boils down to this meeting that'll happen later today between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. That initial interaction when they meet will tell us basically everything we need to know. I don't think Mark Carney's going to make a deal. I don't think he's going to come out of this with anything. Stay tuned to find out.